and anytime when you introduce a new technology, there's a difference between what's happening in the lab in very secure, comfortable four walls, and what's happening in real life. And I think especially in retail, where stores are, it's a mess. It's really everything between the people who are working, the patrons, the clients, and the people who work and putting product not on the right shelf. It's really mayhem of sorts. And I think making sure that the understanding you have in the lab, how do you translate that into real life, for me is key. And I don't know that I think that physical retail is lagging anymore. Obviously, it did, but I think it's evolving a different type of intelligence, let's call it. Obviously, e-commerce, we know, had very structured, clean data from the start. That's the whole point of e-commerce. But stores, I think, and to Joe's point, years ago, the hardware part of it, which camera do you have, which was also, a gating. Do I want to make the investment and put all these cameras in stores? It's a big investment on CapEx. And that was the gating to get some data. I think today, with the advancement of the edge devices, stores are finally gaining that visibility into physical actions because the hardware side of it is good enough. And that's really all it takes, just to be good enough. And then the AI piece on top of these cameras is really where the value comes from.
Yeah, I think the AI on edge is one of the really most interesting value creators because of that legacy repurposing of cameras that you can put in, and your infrastructure costs your hardware infrastructure may not necessarily have to rise to meet that. So in terms of kind of real world cases, maybe we can take a few of these. Is there a big deal right now in security and loss prevention that hasn't been there before? I mean, is it more autonomous now? Is there a real kind of a step function up today, or is that still a big issue?
So look, I can kick this off. Obviously, I think if we think about the first thing when security and loss prevention, I think everybody expected self-checkout as an example, to lower labor costs, right? You have self-checkout, you don't need cashiers. But in many cases, what it actually did, it increased the shrink, which made loss prevention, a business logic instead of an afterthought. And maybe self-checkout really cut the lines and the labor cost, but it also created other costs, or again, rephrasing it, loss vectors like misscans and incorrect barcodes, and intentional or accidental theft at times. And I think when you think about computer vision and how it overlaps with self-checkout, you can really reduce the shrink and enhance the trust if you know how to deploy them in the stores in the right way. And if you use the headcount that you have in the stores in a different way than you did before, maybe not at checkout, but in a more accurate way of deployment of that headcount.
Shrink averages, I don't know, it's going to be somewhere between 1% to 1.5%. I think it has gone up, Arnon, like you said, after a lot of self-checkout sort of taking off. A lot of it's due to non-scans. Like sometimes it is unintentional when you particularly in grocery stores, like you're weighing a mango, right? Like, and sometimes it may not be correct, or somebody's putting in something a lot cheaper than a mango in there somehow, right, on purpose. So it's hard to know exactly why that is happening. So there's new behaviors that are happening, and shrink, if you can, particularly for grocers, if you can reduce shrink, I think the whole point of AI in a store is to increase your free cash flow. And you've got all these different data points coming from a lot of different places. Computer vision is going to be capturing a lot of those. And I think that's where, if you were actually to create a hierarchy of needs for computer vision in a store, I think shrink is probably the bottom one where you start with, and then you probably quickly move to inventory accuracy and replenishment from there. But I think shrink is definitely a great place to start.
I agree. The way to think about it is that self-checkout without vision is really automation without assurance. So again, you can do the automation and help self-checkout, but without the vision that ties into real time to operationalize the people in the store, you don't have assurance that what you're doing is the right thing. And I think that's exactly to your point, Joe, what stores realize that it's just not good enough.
At a per store level, individual store level, aside from shrink, is there any other use cases that come in terms of the customer experience just by having that visual camera? Like, does it change the customer experience so that it not just affects the cost side, but helps on the revenue side?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I was moving there after the shrink conversation. I think it gets into on-shelf availability. Every store struggles with that today. Like, we hear it all the time. And I mean, I'm here in Minneapolis, and we hear about it at Target all the time too, as being one of their biggest issues of what's slowing their growth. And I think that's a great way to look at it. But you start adding the predictive analytics to it too, and how that works then with vendor marketing, how that's going to work with the future of how agentic commerce works. Where I'll hit on that just briefly, which is there's really two reasons, or two ways that agentic commerce gets impacted here with computer vision in the store. Is there's going to be an intent-based visit, and then there's going to be a browsing-based visit. So today, the way that grocers, for example, have milk in the back, they think that obviously it drives more sales because you have to walk through the whole store, and that creates more of that browsing visit. If you have an intent-based visit for milk, maybe that changes once we actually get smarter about what people are coming in for ahead of time. If it's tied to their loyalty program, it's tied to their app that they're coming into the store with. They can see where their dwell time is. They can see what they search for beforehand, and they have some level of prediction to maybe lay out a store differently. It might be really interesting to see what happens when we start actually having an action layer around computer vision in stores attached to the future of what agentic commerce means, or how predictive it can be in the future.
Yeah, and I think there's other ways that we can think about how to use computer vision. Just that notion of somebody seeing everything that's happening in the store, and again, obviously we covered self-checkout and the advantages and frustrations it can bring, but just think about a patron in the store looking for an item and can't find it, and you can track the motion and see that somebody's looking at shelves and takes and puts back items on the shelf. If we can send somebody to ask them what they're looking for and why they're frustrated and help, you're not leaving money on the table by having that customer walk out not finding what they came in to find and frustrated at that. And also, if you have somebody who's walking in the store and you see that they're picking up a number of items, and that X% of people who pick up pretzels and chips also buy beer, as an example, again, help direct them in that direction. I think there's so much that stores can do. And again, to the earlier point, turning stores from a black box of we have no idea what's happening to really understand what people are doing in the store, what they're looking for, where they face challenges or issues in the store, and then direct somebody, and maybe that somebody was a cashier before, but now let's direct that person into helping a specific customer at exactly the point in time where they need help.
Right. I mean, store as an agent, maybe that's what you can call it that, right? It becomes an agent itself. Even go so as far as to say, like, you've got planograms that are the same across all stores in the country. Maybe it becomes, hey, this store is actually acting on its own to know exactly what its localized customers really want in more real time, and have it be able to action on that a lot faster. Setting up new planograms, setting up new ways to sell, having different products in every store, maybe even if they're just across the river from each other, right? So this is what gives it the ability to do, and computer vision is going to be play a big role in that.
This sounds amazing, but how daunting is it for an enterprise to do? Is this something that could be started in small blocks, or does it really need to be, this is the strategy in a retail setting? Like, where does it sit from the kind of the strategic mindset, and not just, from a implementation perspective, but how do you create a differentiation in this when you're thinking at a strategic level? So pilots sound like a way to dip your toes in it and in the newest technologies. But how daunting is this, and how essential is it to do this today, to think this way, if you're in the competitive retail space? Arnon, maybe you want to?
Yeah, I think, and again, this is something we talked about. Computer vision, like many things, is so much harder than it looks in the real world. And I think really the right way to phrase this is retail is really a pretty hostile environment for AI. I mean, we all talk about model accuracy and how important it is, but in practice, in reality, accuracy is really shaped by the store, at the store, and not in the lab. Little things from lighting changes and the shelves get messy and people are in front of cameras and blocking their view. Products that look almost identical, but not really, especially when you think about private labels in the stores. This is really where whatever system you have gets put to the test. And obviously, as anything with life, it's usually at exactly the worst moments that you wouldn't want to happen, whether it's holidays or promotions or peak traffic time or whatever it is. Again, not to belabor that point, but I think self-checkout was a great example. People expected it to be super simple on paper. It is, right? Scan the item, pay, move on, you're done. And in reality, it wasn't exactly like that. Again, barcodes can lie, as weird as that sounds. Weight checks fail sometimes when you had that mechanism in the stores. Again, customers make honest mistakes, not to mention fraud, and sometimes it is fraud. How do you differentiate and know what action to take? So I think if you have a system that takes or treats everything in the same way, that's a problem. And I think, retailers who really get ahead in how they treat, different SKUs onboarding and data updates, and again, an operational process, I think that to me is the key. It's not just a data science task or initiative. It's really an operational process. How do I take that data, understand when it's accurate and when it isn't, and then do a call to action in the store, in live? I think that to me is key, and I think that's what people realize throughout the years. This is not just a technology play, it's an operations play, and that's exactly what they had to get done.